All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In. Mitch Michals here, the sports podcast covering the game you know and love into the offseason. We have a very special guest on this week's show. Really a privilege to talk to this person. One of the most impactful voices in the sport of tennis for several decades, maybe more than he'd like to admit, but a top 5 player, 20 titles to his name. He's coached major champions in 3 different decades now, an author, a premier commentator, as well as the author of one of the most influential books, Winning Ugly, that this sport has ever seen. Brad Gilbert, welcome to the show. Really excited to talk to you.
How you doing this late morning in Cali? Inside in. That means I'm running around the backhand and you're hitting an inside in forehand.
Yeah, I appreciate you. You get the reference. You get the knowledge. A lot of people say inside out's trendy. We try to buck the trends here, so inside out's cool. We appreciate that shot, but yeah. We like to hit a little inside in here, but Brad, no, this is a blast to get to talk to you. As I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this show are fans of yourself, like I am. Starting with kind of where I want to begin, this is we're in the tennis off season. It's the shortest month of the year, but it's funny how it's like 2 weeks and then everybody just ramps up for another season. And as a tennis player, I'm sure you look at the calendar as just looking at it tennis wise, like January equals Australia, May equals French Open, and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for every player, your journey and where you're at and what you're doing at this time, is crucial to the following year. How did you end the year? What changes did you make? What changes are you making in your game? Trying to fix things, or are you tired? Do you need rest? Are you playing some exos? There's a lot of different variables. But I also think, for most players, it's a huge time to kind of refresh and figure out, where you're going and where you want to go.
Were you a creature of habit when you played, and maybe the players that you coached where off seasons had a similar format, or did you adjust based on a variety of factors? I'm curious your perspective, both as a player and as a coach.
I mean, it's interesting. Early in my career, I didn't feel like there was much of an off season. Because Australia came so late, like at the end of November, December, and believe it or not, we had a bunch of tournaments that like I played early in my career, like Philly, Memphis, Chicago, lots of other indoor tournaments. So I played a lot, early in the year. So I don't specifically remember, like these off seasons or long off seasons. They seem like there are more now, and the players want longer.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear each player have a different perspective, whether they're working on their fitness or adding stuff to their game, or just, as you said, getting some rest. And in your story, Brad, I know it's your Bay Area through and through, the good times and the bad with some of those other sports teams, but we've seen your story, and I think it's important to note for the people that just know you as a coach and commentator, finding the game as a kid in the era that you did in the Bay Area. What was that like as a young tennis player in your region of the world?
You know what? I actually, I grew up playing at this park called Davies Tennis Stadium, and I guess way back in the day, it wasn't okay. You look at the back of a World Tennis magazine or some of these other things where you get some results, and it wasn't on TV, and you didn't know all the variables of where tennis was, other than the majors, and but you thought like, okay, where we were at, there was a lot of good players. So I got to enjoy playing, and then I remember we had a big tournament. Barry McKay had a tournament. First, it started at Berkeley Tennis Club, which I was a ball boy, and later became a lines person when it moved to Cow Palace. And team tennis, believe it or not, in the early 70s was pretty darn big. I remember going to the Golden Gators and thinking, man, there's like 12 to 13,000 people here watching this, crazy tennis.
I know you said something that I have to circle back to because it is kind of a dying breed, but you were a lines person at one point. So how did that affect you and how you saw tennis, and maybe give you an appreciation for the game by serving in the role that's much maligned, and as we saw in your era, kind of took some flack from some of the top players?
Yeah, what's funny is like I think both me and my older brother did it,
Good.
but like I certainly felt like, okay, 12 years old, I could see the line. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult if you're standing on the line, or you know, I think it's a little more intense being the ball kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
especially if you're at the net. But I got to do both of them there for Barry McKay's tournament, so that tournament was always so special to my heart.
So you go from Foothill Junior College to Pepperdine. As we advance along in your story, Pepperdine, you become an All-American NCAA singles finalist. But, and I love that story because it epitomizes your career. You grinded, you worked to get to where you were. But at that point, did you consider the pros a path, or was it just one match, 1 year at a time?
Well, I started for a cup of coffee at Arizona State. And way back in the day, long before Google, like I had no freaking idea that it was a million degrees in Arizona.
Yeah.
I'd never even seen the campus. The coach had given me a scholarship. Unfortunately, 3 weeks before I got there, they fired him. So the new
Wow.
coach that came in brought like 3, 4 players with him from Irvine, and
Mm.
all to redshirt and play. And I knew right away wasn't a good situation. Told my dad, and he was like, "No, you got to tough it out." I'm like, "No, I'm not staying here." Which I lasted one semester, and I went to Foothill. And sometimes you don't know why you've gotten to somewhere. When I got to Foothill, Shiv was the greatest ever at making everybody feel like you were at Stanford. You were at the best place. And once I got there and met him, things started to change rapidly for the better for me.
Yeah.
And I probably knew after about 6 months being at Foothill, like I
Yeah.
was going from, my last year in the 18s, I was like 35 in the country. But I knew in about 6 months of being at Foothill, I was going to be a pro.
Wow. That confidence that you got instilled in you by your coach, was that something? It sounds like it's something you took along with you in your coaching journey, that it's about getting the players to believe that not only are the weapons there and you can develop your game, but you have to have that self-belief to really maximize your potential.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a different learning progression. Probably one of the hardest transitions for good juniors and college players is when you get to the pros, you haven't lost a lot.
Mm.
And in my case, I would say I lost a lot more. Back in the day, I mean, I barely left my section, and we played like when I was in the 12s, I played the 12s and 14s, 14s and 16s, 16s and 18s, men's tournaments. So I lost a lot. I lost a lot at the park. So a lot of times now, so many of these good juniors haven't lost that much. They lose 3 to 5 times a year. You get to the pro tour. I remember my coach would tell me 32 draw. There's only one loser. I mean, there's only, excuse me,
Yeah.
one winner, 31 losers.
Mhm.
You got to learn to handle this and handle adversity and be able to, each week regroup.
Yeah, that's such wise advice. I mean, a lot of players, especially the prodigy, especially the people that have the most talent, aren't used to losing, and you get to the pros and you're at the very top of the sport. Your career, Brad, I mean, you accomplished a lot, got to number 4 in the world, won all those titles. But did you thrive, and did you enjoy the role that you had of really frustrating the opposition? Because you've written about it, you've talked about how you tactically approach the game, but did you really enjoy that role of really being the one that frustrated the top players out there?
Well, shit, I wish I was better. I wish I served better. I wish I had a bigger forehand like Andre. But, for me, it's funny, it's so long ago that I played, you forget about it. But I think I enjoyed more than anything about tennis. When I was a little kid, when I would go to this park, you, you know, you could be a little kid or you could be a little kid with game. And if you had game, you were accepted. If you didn't have game, you know, you're bothering us. Because my older brother played there. My sister was really good, who was 2 years older. She was the best in our family by far.
Mhm.
Uh, when my sister was 14, she was ranked in the top 5 in the country in the 14, 16s, and 18s. And
Yeah.
I was way behind that. But I think that so many of my good battles and where I became a better player was playing against older kids, older adults, and you play sets and you keep a tally.
Yeah, and shout out to your sister Dana Gilbert. Had a great career for herself and really motivation. I'm just fascinated and inspired by that story because you had to be a fighter to get to where you got. And with that, as we kind of put a bow on this part of the convo, I wanted to ask you if you had any favorite memories on the court. Not maybe not necessarily the title winning performances, but just matches, problem solving, anything when you look back at from the
I mean,
big viewpoint
as a kid,
as a pro player.
you you know the most for me, just first of all having the opportunity to
Yeah.
play.
Hmm.
When I turned pro at 20, I couldn't believe like maybe the first time you played a tournament. It's like, okay, this is for real now.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it as a job or a grind, and it was an amazing opportunity. And probably, of my 14-year career, probably the biggest highlight was the 88 Olympics in Seoul,
Mhm.
because probably until I knew 84 was a demonstration sport until they made it a medal sport. Like in 80, you
Mhm.
never really thought about
Right.
that was going to be a part of your career.
Yeah.
Um, and when you played Olympics, they don't mention your name for 2 weeks. It's Game USA, and then when you get a chance to walk in the Olympic Stadium with all
Yeah.
the other athletes, it's an amazing sense of pride.
Yeah, I had that written down, your bronze medal in the Olympics. I also had, it was a little before my time, but I'm a historian of the game. So the 87 match against Becker at the US Open, because not only was it a performance coming back, rallying, beating the conditions, being an all-time great player, but you're one of the biggest advocates, Brad, for best of five in major Grand Slams still going. So I want to give you the floor and tell the listeners out there why we shouldn't change anything, why best of five is the way to go for the indefinite future.
You know what's crazy is for so many people now they don't realize we played way more best of five. All Davis Cup was
Yeah.
best of five. I must have played, shoot, I don't even know. Maybe Sharko knows. I played 40 ATV finals. I gotta think I played 15 of them were 5 sets. They would switch them. The
Yeah.
WCT final in Dallas, the whole, quarter semifinal
Yeah.
was best of five. So I like that. I love the opportunity that you can blow it from 2 sets to none. You can come back from 2 sets to none. So it's strategic and it's physical.
Yeah, it's the best. And the problem solving, the strategic side is, both of those things together. It just makes it so much intense drama and really proves a champion's worth and abilities out there. When you got into coaching, though, Brad, when you started working with Andre in the '90s, you weren't officially retired yet. We knew what Andre's potential was at that time. You helped him unlock that greater level. But did you have any trepidation or any pause about getting into the coaching world at such a young age?
It's a good question. Sometimes I wasn't thinking about it because
Yeah.
I was still playing. But when
Mhm.
I went to dinner with Andre and we were starting to talk about where his tennis was at and where it could go, the first thing was, I can't believe you freaking lost to me 4 times. I mean, that's shocking in itself that you've lost to me 4 times. And I feel like just from
Yeah.
playing you, I have a better understanding of how you can become a better player. There's no way you should lose to me because it was, a lot of times he would lose to himself, losing to me. So I had a good understanding for his game, and I thought he would do well instantly. So you know, it you know, I thought probably if you'd asked me before, I was going to still play for another 2, 3 years, and then who knows what I was going to do.
I did have a question about Andre and his just dominance of the sport, but in your coaching life, and maybe even your playing life, that run in the summer of '95, is that about as big? I mean, heat check, you're a big Steph Curry fan. Is that like the ultimate tennis heat check, how good he was playing that summer?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it was incredible. I mean, and it's probably not like on the pantheon like it should be because he won 26 in a row and didn't win the
Mm,
27th.
mm,
Had he won the 27th, it's like incredible. He just swept the table. I mean, he was on another level, and it was fun to see. And you you know the maturation of his game to where he was playing and playing with you,
yeah.
the ability to go from a player that made tons of winners and tons of unforced errors to a player that just played unbelievably solid. And then he would beat you with that. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Is that maybe one of the most proud moments you have as a coach, whether it's him or some of the other players you work with, when they find consistency? Because I think a lot of times fans are like, oh, these big weapons, they're the difference makers. But especially from a coach, when you find a player that's, and we're seeing it now in the men's and women's games, when these players find that level of consistency, is that as good as it gets as a coach?
I think your whole goal, fingers crossed, and obviously you need a player with immense talent. But helping somebody fulfill their dreams, that worked hard, and then if you can do your part, you can help a little bit. I think the journey, maybe the best is watching in December when you're having a practice and you're thinking about, 6 weeks away, Australia,
Right.
or Andre was the one. I never, my biggest regret as a player to a coach, I never understood this word. And Andre was the one that presented it to me because it was over my head. It was peak. And I'm like, peak, I'm thinking about every single week, good or bad,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just going. And sometimes you play bad because, maybe I was tired, but I didn't think about. So Andre could literally, I want to be ready for 8 weeks out to make this run. And I was like, my brain would back up 7 weeks thinking about the tournament before. So once I got that, and it was all about him learning to win majors, it made me a way better coach.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of the big three for really demonstrating that over and over again for the fans out there. But you're 100% right. Andre was 100% right. Peaking to play your best when it matters the most is such a insane skill for the very best. We've got more with Brad Gilbert here on Tennis Channel Inside In, talking to the legendary coach of many great players, many slam champions, a top 5 player in his own right. Did you always have that tactical approach to coaching, kind of getting into the big picture stuff, or did you earn that reputation as you went along of being a master strategist, so to speak?
Um, I think I was always fascinated, with, tactics and coaching, from watching other sports. And I would say I probably was most fascinated when I was at the park when I
Mhm.
was 12 or 13 and watching two guys that maybe I played against.
Mhm.
And then I'm sitting there watching and thinking what they're doing or what my
Mhm.
older brother or sister doing. I always kind of liked, how, you won and lost, you know, you
Yeah.
know, and, but back then, believe it or not, you cannot believe how many people serve in volleys, and you played on lightning fast courts. But I like thinking about, you know, what I could do or what someone else was doing.
Yeah, and it combines strategy, it combines one-on-one. You have a chance to really figure it out. That's why tennis really is the best. You get into the bigger picture stuff too, Brad, about how you've been around this game for so long. It's evolved. You said serve and volley. It's changed so much. What's something that really stands out the current game, that an evolution that maybe you're not surprised by, but you've seen a completely change 180 from when you started coming up in tennis?
Ooh, probably the
Mm,
speed and athleticism, the size. You're seeing big guys like Medvedev and Zverev. These guys are 6'6" and they move like smaller guys. And another thing, a movement that I thought I would never see. Yeah, I remember back in the day when American players or some players could even slide on clay. Now
yeah.
that you see guys slide and girls, they slide and glide on a hard court like it's completely normal. So,
Yeah.
and when I was a kid, you never saw one person leap off the ground. And now, from leaping off the ground when you serve to hitting forehands and hitting open stance, jump stops, all of that is pretty amazing. But it's like I will say that you become normal seeing it, but it's still
Yeah.
pretty incredible to see it. And when I was playing way back in the day, everything was on the ground. And
Right.
and also too, the craziest thing is on so many. I learned to play. We had these things in California called bald hard courts. You didn't even know they were bald, but you could see your reflection. The courts were so fast, the balls never bounced up. And now, from grass to hard courts, everything is way up higher because of the grit and sand,
Yeah.
and they've slowed things down, and it's for the better.
It's funny as you say that. I was thinking I saw a highlight the other week of, I think it was a Davis Cup tie in the 80s, maybe Italy or somewhere. They were playing on it looked like a parquet floor. It looked like where the Celtics played. And I couldn't believe that was a surface that people
We
play tennis on.
played, let me tell you,
Yeah.
we played on some shite courts. We played on this thing called Supreme Court, which was a rubber mat. We played on carpet. I played on crushed seashell before in Manila. The fake grass with the sand. But the first time I played on grass in '83, dropped the ball. Even in England, it didn't bounce higher than your socks.
Wow. It's crazy how the game has evolved, and as you said, for the better in a lot, if not most ways. Some of the other players that you worked with, I wanted to get your thoughts on. You have the partnership with Andy Roddick. You were with him when he wins his U.S. Open title, and you got to see Andy Murray as well after that, the young Andy Murray as he was coming up. So what was your experience like as the 21st century started, Brad, working with these soon to be, in Andy Roddick's case, a current superstar, and in Murray's case, a future superstar player?
I think no matter, whenever you start coaching somebody, whether or not short term, whatever, you just hope in some way you can help them along their journey become a better player.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole goal.
Yeah, no, it's been very, it's been very fun to see whenever you start working with someone, how they embrace everything. Even when Roddick's case, like you said, like no visors, that's just not going to work for me. And he listened.
Yeah, the visor and the gel and the hair was a tough go. But he blames me now that if I would have let him keep wearing the visor, he wouldn't be bald.
Okay.
Because all the sweat under his trucker hat, that caused him to go bald. So he blames me for that.
I'm going to have to check the science on that. And then, of course, obviously, working with Coco Gauff, winning the U.S. Open, a phenomenal run there, and really a tribute to your coaching, how tactically she adjusted. And on the topic of information, Brad, I know that there's so much info, stats, analytics out there that players and coaches can use at their disposal. But I wanted to ask you, do you think maybe there is too much information overload where we've gotten? Because I think there's value in analytics and info, but do you think sometimes there is maybe a little too much, and especially in a one-on-one sport like tennis?
I mean, it's all good. But you got to find the balance. And remember, you can be looking at it, but they also have information on you too. Right. Don't think that, whoa, I got all this info. Believe me, they got the same info on you.
Right. No, it's very sage advice, especially knowing how much preparation goes in to win these events. And then, Brad, you became, an author, writing the book Winning Ugly. When you wrote that book, did you realize maybe the impact it was going to have, or when it started to have kind of a sizable impact on the tennis community?
Honestly, no. I mean, how would you know? I'm not a writer, but Steve Jameson, who had never written before, had the idea. And then we banged it out like in 6 weeks. And he didn't even have a book deal. He'd never written it.
Right.
But I think probably the most eye-opening thing was watching the two guys that he played against for 15 years at the club. And we were sitting up on the ledge watching them, and he had zero idea what their strengths and weaknesses were, and he couldn't really analyze their game. And then when I started analyzing their game for him, told him what this guy can and can't do, he was like shocked I could do it. It's like, what do you mean? It's like this guy, he throws the toss to the left, he can't serve wide. He can only sneak it up the middle. The way this guy slaps his backhand, he can never hit it down the line. So it just was, thinking about ways that people maybe hadn't looked at the game. But yeah, you have no idea.
Right. I think one of the best lessons in that book is preaching honesty, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, knowing what your limitations are. And on that same note, if we talk about tennis in the current day, is there a piece of advice maybe for any rec league players out there that want to get better and want to hear Brad Gilbert's piece of advice for how to maybe marginally improve?
Well, I think the most important thing for, let's say you're a 4-0, I call it learn how to manage, or her, I say learn how to manage your game. And it is being honest. Okay, my backhand's not that strong. I'm not going to try to rip it. How can I manage it and maybe take some more risk with my forehand? if my second serve is giving me trouble in matches, maybe let's put first serve in play. So I do think about how you manage your game. Can make a difference for sometimes 2 games a set.
Yeah, that's very good advice there, because every player at any level wants to improve. They're chasing something, and managing your game surely helps. And on the final note on your career, the commentary career, you've been a voice, you've been covering the sports, the slams for so many years, calling some of the great matches. But where did you decide, or was it always organically in there, to bring that entertainment and that flair? Because I don't think any broadcaster is quite like you. I mean that glowingly, of course, but the entertaining style, the nicknames, where did that genesis come from?
It's funny. I'm not, like you talked about the book. I'm not a writer. I'm not media trained. I like to think I try to do the best job of being me, and I'm entertained. When I'm watching matches. Obviously, when you're courtside, when you're in the booth, when you're in studio riffing, maybe that's more, where you get to have fun because it's, I talk or setting up a match. So there's different things and different nuances, but I like to think of, more than anything, it's like I'd be watching it at home, so it's pretty fun to be doing it.
Yeah, you genuinely love tennis. I think that escapes off the screen. Some commentators in all sports, you might not know if they fully love what they're doing, but you see that you actually love the game. And you have the best piece of advice for major tennis, right? It's that sleep is overrated during those 2 weeks.
Very overrated, extremely overrated. And just getting to go to slams and call them and be part of them. That, like, I started going to slams. My first slam, I think I went to in 1981 U.S. Open. I haven't missed one since. So there's nothing better, whether or not you're playing, you're coaching, you're commentating, just getting involved in them has been an incredible experience.
Well, Brad, this has been a blast. Really do appreciate your time. The last kind of thing I have for you is, I know you do a lot of great work with clinics and events and such. And I know you just got back from Hawaii. So I wanted to ask you about that experience and how you're still involved in the game, even giving back to it at your position, your prominence.
Well, I had back-to-back. Well, this is the 3rd year we've done these clinics in Hawaii. We raise money on the Big Island for the high schools to get equipment and rackets, clothes. So it was fun. We had 42 players this year. A little windy for the tournament the last day, and we were just coming off of about 9 weeks straight that I worked with my wife again, Kim, on the movie Dink. It's a little bit of tennis and a lot of pickleball. So it's the second movie we've done. So that was a fun experience. Anything that I'm doing in tennis, I enjoy. I like to think of I'm a total tennis lifer. So if I'm getting to do something tennis, in this case was a little bit of pickle, so I had to learn a little more about pickle. It's a great experience.
Yeah, Brad was the guy who was basically the director of Challengers.
I wasn't. I was technical advisor with my wife.
Technical advisor. I misspoke. Technical, the tennis guy there. Took him to boot camp. Did a great job. Great level. It's hard to have tennis look good in a movie. We've seen a lot of bad examples for a while. So you did a great job there. Looking forward to Dink. Brad Gilbert, always a blast, kind of getting to know new people, especially yourself. And I had to ask you about the Bay Area sports, though. I mean, it's not a great time to be a Raiders fan just yet, but you were coming off of the greatest run in basketball history from your hometown team, the Warriors. So I guess you can't have it all.
No, that was the greatest, 8-9 years ever. But, hopefully once in my lifetime. My son is 36 years old. So hopefully we'll see it in our lifetime together, the Raiders win. So they haven't won now 40 years. So, and the same with my A's, but we've given up on them. They're playing in the minor league park in Sacramento. But hopefully the Raiders one day.
One day. My dad grew up a big Jack Tatum fan, so I got some love for the Raiders too. So, Brad Gilbert, huge fan of yours. Really appreciate you giving me the time here on Tennis Channel Inside, and all the best going forward. Thanks for coming on the podcast.